Hey everybody, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to fill out your intent form. The first one that we're doing, at least in our classes, is going to be on paper. It helps us get our thoughts down. But if you are actually competing in the V.A.S.E competition, then the actual final draft will be online. Either way, you want it to be nice because this set of questions is how your juror, be it an actual juror for the V.A.S.E competition, or if your juror is another teacher at the school because you're not actually competing, is getting a good idea of your thought process. Some of you do not interview so well, and this will help clarify anything that your mouth messes up on that day. So to get this filled out, I'm going to have a couple of things with me. The first and probably most important is going to be an artwork, my artwork, though this one's not actually mine. This is just my example, so bear with me if anything that I say, if you're the student that made this, just be aware. If anything I say is not what you were thinking, don't worry, I'm making it up. Anyway, so this is an actual student work. I'm pretending like I'm the one that made it, so be aware. Next thing I'm going to need, planning packet. You should hopefully have some kind of plan set out, even if your planning packet or plan doesn't necessarily involve this particular packet. Any of the planning that you've done, the sketches, research, any plans that you made, your theme, you want to know all of those things. So if you have a packet like this or something similar to it, you probably want to have that next to you. It'll help you whenever you're doing some of the questions, especially up here at the top. And then the last thing that I'm going to have is this. It is just a little list of some sentence starters and helps me figure out what these particular questions are actually asking me to do. So I'm going to base it from here, but if you don't have that, you can look at this one nicely with me. So first thing first, over here, I need to do a couple of things. Box 1 says things already filled in for you, your name, information about your artwork, information about your teacher in school, and you want to double check them all. If you are doing the actual online form, whenever you're doing your final draft of this, then that online form will have several things already filled in for you, like your name. You want to put yours in here on our practice form. So mine will say, instead of Jones John, it might say Joe Bag O' Donuts. Bag O' Donuts. Joe Bag O' Donuts. Check that it says correctly 2D or 3D. If you are in AP or dual credit courses, etc., then you want a little Y here. Otherwise, a no for Art 1, 2, or 3. Credits is how many years you've been in art. If you've only successfully completed half of a year of art because you're in Art 1, it would be 0.5. If you are in Art 3, it might be 2.5. If you're in Art 4, it might be 3.5. If you are doing an animation, you might need a link to your animation on YouTube right there. And then, of course, you're going to have your teacher's information, their TAEA number. You're going to want your title in here. Don't worry if your title is not, fully nailed down yet. We have a little bit of time to change it still, but whatever our working title is going to be. So in this one, it's going to be Music, because I said so. Anytown High School, Anytown ISD, those should be correct. If they're not, then something is drastically wrong. And you're going to need your artwork size. So this artwork right here is about 12 by 18. So 12 by 18. No, not 12 by 18. 12 by... Yeah, 18-ish, whatever. I'm not measuring it. So say that it's 12 by 18, even if it's not, it's probably not. Definitely not, actually. Anyway, so, you know what, 24. 24 sounds about more correct. Actually measure yours. Again, this is just an example, so forgive me. All right, so now we're going to actually get on to other stuff. That is all double checked. I'm going to go in and scratch those in, whatever they need to be. They should probably already be correct, but if they're not, you need to let your teacher know. Sources for your artwork. There are 4 possible boxes. You want to check all that apply, but you must have proof for your reference slides. If you're doing the actual V.A.S.E competition, reference slides are what the jurors and the selectors and the qualifiers are going to be checking to make sure that your material is original. So this is basically you trying to prove that what you're doing is original. So you have 4 options: original photograph, original sketch, observation / imagination, and photograph entry. What that means is if you're working from original photos, that would be photos that you took yourself, directed someone else to take, saying like, for example, it's like, oh, stand over here, squat down near the ground, you should have my foot in the corner and my head up in the other corner. Like, so you tell someone what kind of picture to take of you because you can't take it yourself. Or it might be a family photo as part of your history. So this is a photo that already exists or one that you take from your camera roll. If that is something that you used, you took a picture and you're using it as reference, check off that box. Also make sure that you have access to that for your reference slide. Second one says, I worked from one or more original sketches. So maybe you didn't draw from a photograph. Maybe you were drawing like doodling for a warm-up or something like that, or maybe you were just doodling in math class. And that's what you decide that you're going to develop into a further artwork. That is drawing from original sketch. You can check that one off. Sometimes you will have both, and that is okay. They are not mutually exclusive. Third one says, I worked from observation and or my imagination. So you're just drawing from your head. You didn't start from any kind of sketch. You didn't worry about any of that. You just started drawing and that was it. Or maybe you're looking at something while you're drawing it. There was something directly in front of you. If there was something directly in front of you, you would check that off. And then the last one is original photography entry. This is you took several photographs and you chose from those photographs which one to submit. So this one, if you have this one as your entry, almost none of these are going to be checked. So this one is mutually exclusive. You cannot check off all 4. It is only up to 3, and you're probably only going to have photography if the photography is what you're doing. So you want to check off all the things that apply. Anything that you check, you need to make sure that you have evidence for. So they might be sketches, they might be photos, or if it's your imagination, it might be a little journal entry on, I started drawing this because I was inspired by that. Think like a small, paragraph journal entry. That would be your process notes, as they say, upload process notes into reference. Or you might have little doodles or something off to the side that's part of your imagination drawing. All right, so that's box 1. Box 2 is student research and application to work. It says, explain the purpose or message of your artwork or any artist's works or styles that may have influenced you. So if you look over at our little resource right here, it says, why did you make it? What reason did you create this? This is where your planning packet can start to come into help here. So behind purpose or message, you're going to be looking at a couple different things. You're going to be looking at your brainstorming, your themes or emotions that you might be looking at. For box 1, you might be looking at your sources list, whatever sources you used, if you have one. You might be looking at theme planning that you have for box number 2. You might be looking at, where's the next one? You might be looking at your artist inspiration, if it's a community artist, historical artist, or whatever. So for this particular artwork that I have in front of me, again, I'm making this up, child, if you made this artwork and you're like, that's not true, don't worry, I'm pulling this from my imagination as what I would imagine it is. I'm saying that probably I was inspired by some encaustic artworks that I might have seen somewhere in a coffee shop nearby. Maybe I don't know that artist, but they really inspired me. But they had a bunch of beach scenes, and I like music. I'm really into that right now. I've been learning in orchestra for 4 years, and I play guitar on my own. I couldn't get into guitar class, but I was really salty about it. But I really like those thick textures, and I'm kind of country maybe, so I wear boots all the time, and I like that rustic look where everything looks like peeling paint a little bit, and all of those things really inspired me to make this artwork. So I'm going to come back over here to box number 2, and I'm going to be okay, so here are some sentence stems. Any of these might be good places to start for what I'm writing in here. The purpose of my artwork is it showing love? Is it showing family? Is it showing love of something specific? The meaning of my artwork is, if that triggers a little something a little better, the meaning of my artwork might be that you are very tired of your parents coming home super early and knocking you off your game time. I don't know. An artist who inspired me was, and you might describe an artist that you researched whenever looking into your painting before you got started, or your artwork before you got started. Suggestion: have a minimum of 2 sentences. 2 sentences. Maximum of 5. Minimum of 2 sentences, maximum of 5. There's not a ton of room in here. The actual one is online, so you have a little bit more room than this, but it's still not a lot. So be conservative. You want to explain cleanly and concisely. That's why we're doing a practice version. All right, so student research, explain purposes of message. The meaning of my artwork is to show rustic styled instruments to showcase my interests. Okay, meaning of my work, show rustic styled instruments to showcase my interests. I like rustic things and I like music. That's where I'm at. Specifically stringed instruments, but as I said, we're trying to be a little bit more concise here. All right, beyond that, again, a minimum of 2, I've only got 1. An artist who inspired me is an unknown local artist who paints with encaustics to create very thick, detailed texture. Bam, bam. This is important. I want to include this thick, detailed texture because that is one of the things specifically that I am trying to mimic from my artist that inspires me. If there is absolutely nothing linked between the artist and what I did, then there is no reason to include them. For example, I do not want to say that Michelangelo, the great Renaissance artist, helped inspire this artwork because absolutely nothing about this looks like Michelangelo's work. That would be ridiculous. Maybe he inspired me personally, but it didn't help with this at all. So make sure you're being specific. All right, next box. Box 3, execution and technique. This is talking about materials and processes. The materials I used in my artwork are, or I manipulated my materials by. We are not looking currently for a list of step-by-step things that you did to make your work. We're asking specifically about materials that you used and how you manipulated said materials. If you are not sure about your materials and processes, feel free to ask your art teacher. They will happily remind you of what things you did. Again, I can reference any sort of planning packet that I did to find any kind of genre stuff. In this particular case, one of the things that I was exploring was encaustic versus impasto. Encaustic is painting with wax, impasto is painting really thickly, and I might have done an experiment or two to see which one came up with this really gritty texture the most. And that might be one of the things that I talk about in this particular section. So the materials I used were thick body acrylics, and texture rollers for my paint. I also mixed in gel, there's only one L, medium, to get even more texture. All right. So in this case, the things that I'm saying that I used were just really thick paints. I might have used some texture rollers. Maybe I stamped something. Maybe I like mixed sand into my paint to make it really chunky. If you were doing something like clay, you might have rolled it into slabs. If you were using drawings, maybe you smudged it, or you blended some Prismacolors with some alcohol. All of those are different processes or techniques or ways that you've manipulated your materials in order to make your textures and your surface to come out the way you wanted it to. All right, so next. If any digital applications or processes were used in your artwork, explain them all. So for digital applications, it might be I used Procreate or Photoshop to help complete my artwork. I used Photoshop, Procreate to manipulate my artwork by. If I were doing a digital artwork, this might have a lot of information in it. Or if I had sketched my artwork using an iPad before I got started on an actual canvas, I might have a lot in here. For this particular artwork, I don't really have anything, so I'm gonna say NA for non-applicable, meaning it doesn't apply in this particular case, but you might have a lot. All right, so next is explain how you produced this artwork, technique or process. So processes. This is really how you're gonna tell me, how did you manipulate your materials? The first thing I did was, then I, blah, 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 blah. So over here, explain your process. First, I experimented with encaustic painting. I compared with impasto and used that. I made a highly textured background with gel medium and dry brushing techniques and used dry brushing again to simulate wood. I used paint pen. Here I'm running out of some space. Again, on the digital version, I probably won't need to worry about that. On this version, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna make a little arrow. I'm gonna continue on the back. I used paint pen to clean up my edges and create fine gold details. So I'm saying specifically what techniques I used and where, because I want it to be clear, but I'm trying to be very specific. Did this, did this, did this. All right, explain the most important elements and principles you used to develop this work. This one is going to be box 3.3. We've all had 3. These are all talking about it. Important elements and principles. Elements of art, principles of design. You want to pick at least 2 that show up well in your artwork. So elements of art are line, shape, color, value, texture, space, and form. These are your basic building blocks of art. I would say try and find one in particular that shows up well. In this one, I've been talking about texture quite a bit. So do I have values? Yes. Do I have color? Absolutely. But what is the thing that stands out the most? All of my background texture. This is probably the most interesting thing I have on here. It draws the eye. It's very attention grabbing. So texture is what I'm going to talk about. Principles of design are unity, pattern, emphasis, rhythm, movement, balance, and contrast. Usually your elements of art are going to be related to your principles of design. Principles of design are the results of what happened whenever you've put these together in a way that is successful. So in my particular artwork, my texture's all in my background, and it has very interesting contrast. I have this very bright background next to a very dark double instrument here. So that would be contrast. My texture is creating a contrast between my background and my main figure, my focal point, my positive shapes. So my negative shapes are contrasting with my positive shapes because I have rough texture versus smooth texture, lighter colors versus darker colors. These things are different, they're next to one another, it's contrasting. So my sentence stem is the element my artwork shows is bleu by bleu. And obviously you can also repeat that with the principle of design my artwork shows is bleu by bleu. So in here it's going to be the element of art my artwork, I'm going to say exemplifies, is texture by having a rough texture in the majority of the composition. I like using the word composition instead of artwork because it makes me sound fancier. You want to sound fancy. All right, the next one is my texture helps to create a contrast with my background and my figure. Again, contrast is that principal word that I want to talk about, that texture creates. So there I've got that section right there. All right, next section is box 4. We're finally out of the 3s and we're into 4. Aesthetics and critical judgment. This is whenever it's asking for you to describe the aesthetic and critical decisions you had to make while creating the artwork and why you made them. In short, how did you solve a challenge, or why did you decide it looks the way that it looks? I chose this aesthetic because I talked about it earlier. Whenever I was over here, I was like, yeah, I'm like rough. I like music. I like maybe being a little country. I wear my cowboy boots. I'm like a real rustic kind of human. And it looks a little rough. My paint should be peeling. Talked about that. So that is my aesthetic, and that's why I chose it. So I chose this aesthetic because I'm a rough and tough little cowboy, maybe. A problem I encountered was, this is talking about a challenge. That is a critical decision that you have to make. A critical judgment is whenever you run into a problem, how do you solve it? They don't expect this artwork to go pretty perfectly all the time. If it did, that's kind of dull. Also, you're a liar. Nothing goes well. You know this. Everything gets restarted at least once. So what was a problem you encountered and how did you solve it? So for mine, I chose this aesthetic. If you don't know what the word aesthetic means, it means how things look. So this is, I chose the way this looks, all in one word there with the word aesthetic. I chose this aesthetic because I live in a rural town and my house is on a ranch. A problem I encountered was that I tried encaustic painting, but the experiments were inconsistent and to keep unified, I mimicked the womp womp techniques using acrylic paint instead. All right, so I talked about why it looks the way it looks and a challenge that I had. Last box is probably the most important. It's the box on personal expression. It says, in what ways does this artwork represent your individual point of view, your imagination, your creativity, or your individuality? How does this artwork represent you? Why does this match who you are? Or why is this meaning important to you? Why should anyone care about this artwork? Why do you care about this artwork? There are a lot of things that we're going to assume just by you having made it. We're going to assume you think the thing is cool or that you like or don't like the thing. We don't need to hear that you like the thing or that it's cool. We want to know why it's cool, why you like the thing, or why you don't like the thing. So this artwork expresses me by, or this artwork is important to me because. Both of these are really good ones. I particularly like the second one. This artwork is important to me because. This artwork is important to me because. I don't mean like it helped you through a sad time or something like that. Why is any of this important to you? Because I grew up singing songs about the trees, the grass, and the flowers. Get personal with it. They're not going to know if you're fibbing. For a time, I was very depressed. And stopped singing. When I came out the other side, I found a guitar. So, the more personal, the more meaningful that you can make it, even if it's very vague, the more important and the more the people who are reading this are going to care about this as well. You could say, oh yeah, I like music, but how did music help you? Maybe you have an artwork about a soccer tournament. Like you have like a little soccer trophy. Did soccer help you get through a bad time? Did soccer help you find teammates? Are your only friends your soccer player buddies? Like, talk about it. Now again, you don't have to get too crazy in depth with it, but the more personally connected it is, and the more that you care about it, the more easy it is for whoever's reading to care about it as well. All right, so all that said and done, I now have a first draft of an intent sheet. Give it to your teacher, have them look it over, show it to a friend, see if they can spot any really weird spelling errors. If you have any sentences on there that are incomplete sentences, toss it over to your English teacher and have them critique the crap out of you. Do something to make sure that it sounds good. Because again, if you make it to the state level of this competition, they're never going to interview you. They're not going to talk to you personally. All they're going to do is read this fancy little piece of paper. I mean, well, the printed out version with the nice, not handwritten part. And you want it to sound good. You want it to be clear. You want it to be concise. Again, minimum 2 sentences, maximum about 5. If you go more than that, then you're not going to have enough room. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. And good luck.
Bye.
Bye.